Record.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Thank you guys so much for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. So let's talk about invasive species. Let's dive right into it. I'm going to ask if you have any questions. Hold them until later on in the training for now. We have a lot to get to. Okay. So first, just to make sure everyone is in the right place. So this is the Finger Lakes PRISM's volunteer trail survey. There are two ways to take part in our trail survey. You can either be a trail tracker. That's what this is tonight. This is for beginners. You guys are going to learn 6 invasive species. The surveying process is very simple. If you want to be a trail tracker, you're good. If you are wanted to be a trail master, this is going to be a more advanced portion as a volunteer. You're going to learn over 20 different invasive species. There's going to be a slightly different survey method you're going to use. You are in the wrong place. We have the trainings for trail masters on the 23rd and on June 6th. So you could head to those if you want something a little bit more challenging. But if you're here for the easy stuff, this is our trail tracker training. If you have a friend or someone else that you might know that might also be interested in this, we are going to have a second training on the 25th. Same exact content as this, you only have to go to one of these trainings. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you guys to just myself and who we are. So I'm Matt. I'm the Terrestrial Invasive Species Coordinator for the Finger Lakes PRISM, Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management. We are a partnership between the Finger Lakes Institute at Hobart and Williamson Colleges in Geneva and the New York State DEC. And our goal is to essentially be your local invasive species experts. We work to educate people and provide outreach for invasive species in the Finger Lakes region. We work to help manage and control invasive species and prevent the spread of future invasive species in the Finger Lakes. So we work in 17 counties. You could see in this little nifty map down here. Pretty much everything between Rochester, where I am, over to Syracuse, down to Binghamton, Ithaca, 17 counties total. So you guys are all coming from lots of different places tonight, but we're all meeting here at the same place virtually to work with invasive species in this broad region. Now, we are not the only organization that does this sort of work in New York. We are part of a wider network of PRISMs, basically sister organizations to us that do similar work just in different parts of the state. So if you go out towards Buffalo, there's the Western New York PRISM. You go up towards the Adirondacks, there's the Adirondack PRISM. Long Island is a Long Island PRISM, so on and so forth. So we're here today to talk about invasive species. And invasive species is a really nebulous concept. And I think before we get into really like the training stuff, I think it's important that we're all on the same page in terms of understanding what an invasive species actually is. And here we have 3 different pictures of very famous examples of invasive species here in North America. So here in the top left, this is a Burmese python. These guys are very famous for, taking over the Florida Everglades. They could get to like 20 feet long. They could take down alligators and full-grown deer, and they've completely changed the landscape of the Everglades down south. And I am very glad that we don't have any of these guys here in New York. I don't want to be dealing with them. I'm hopeful that you are too. In the bottom left here, these are zebra mussels covering this color. So you're all familiar with zebra mussels at this point. Zebra mussels are one of our worst aquatic invasive species. They've completely changed the way that our aquatic food webs function. And zebra mussels literally number in the trillions here in North America. And finally, this vine on the right, this is actually kudzu. This is a vine that ate south. You can see in this picture here, it's completely swallowed this forest. We don't have it here in upstate New York just yet, thankfully, but it is kind of on its way with climate change. But we can see in this picture, like all of these trees, all of this ground cover has just been completely eaten by kudzu. So when we're talking about invasive species, it's important to know that we're talking about organisms that have really big impacts on our environment or on our economy. And I think more interestingly, organisms that really aren't closely related to each other in any way, right? Here in this picture, we have a python, we have a vine, and we have some mussels, right? Things that are not closely related to each other at all, very different branches of the tree of life. And, it raises the question, what is it about these particular species that make them so invasive when their close cousins are not capable of causing this much damage? When in terms of defining what an invasive species is, we could spend all day today just talking about what is or is not an invasive species. The quick and dirty way to think about it is an invasive species is any organism that's non-native to an ecosystem whose introduction causes or is likely to cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human health. And generally, most invasive species share characteristics that make them really successful. For one, they have really high reproductive rates. They tend to be really aggressive. They often have no natural predators in their new environments. It's also often because they have very low nutritional value, or they might be poisonous in some way. So we think about like all this kudzu here, and you might think like, well, that's just going to be a field day for the deer. Well, deer are mostly going to avoid invasive species like kudzu because it doesn't taste really good. They're going to go after the more native, more nutritious species. And finally, invasive species are really good at taking advantage of human disturbance. What I mean by that is that as we humans continue to change the landscape of our planet, the new environments we create tend to be places where invasive species do really, really well. You might be wondering, like, how does this happen? Like, how did it even get here? Lots of different pathways that invasive species can move across. The one common thread is that humans are the ones that are moving them in some way or another. And generally, for our intents and purposes, for us in Eastern North America, like the temperate zone, most of our invasive species are coming from two parts of the world, either Europe or Eastern Asia. The main reasons for this is just that these are the two parts of the world that are the most similar climatically to our own. So they have 4 seasons, they have hot summers, they have cold winters. And these are the two parts of the world that we in the United States that we're just the most tied into, right? We have the most trade, we have the most tourism going back and forth. As we're crisscrossing the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean, invasive species are often coming along for the ride. And it's important to note here that we're getting a lot of invasive species from these places, but we are also exporting many of our own native species that are becoming invasive in these regions as well. So for one, beavers are highly invasive in South America. Raccoons are highly invasive in Japan. This is one of the weirdest stories with invasive species. There was actually like an anime back in the 70s called Rascal the Raccoon. And if you were a kid in Japan in the 70s, having a raccoon was like the coolest thing in the world as a pet. So all these Japanese parents start importing wild raccoons from the United States, and then they realize that they now have this wild animal in their house. They start releasing them to the wild, and now raccoons have taken over Japan. Our eastern gray squirrels have really done a number on the squirrels over in Europe. And the fall webworm, otherwise known as fall armyworm, is an insect that's native here to North America and is wiping out forests left and right. Very similar to spongy moth in Asia and Africa. But with that being said, invasive species have a lot of costs associated with them. And ecologically speaking, invasive species have directly contributed to hundreds of species extinctions worldwide and the decline of thousands more, even if they're not causing direct extinctions. Famous examples of something like that would be like the golden toad here. This was a frog that went extinct in Costa Rica back in the 80s because of an invasive fungal disease. So invasive species really are one of the largest drivers of species extinction, especially on islands. Places like Hawaii, New Zealand have gotten really, really hammered by invasive species. And just ecologically speaking, economically speaking, in the United States alone, we collectively spend $120 billion every year controlling invasive species. I really want to stick on that point. It's 120 billion every year. It's not 120 billion over a decade or 50 years or a century. It's 120 billion every single year controlling invasive species. It's a lot of money that we're spending. And it's something that really isn't brought up often enough when we think about invasive species and the damage that they cause and the reasons why we're concerned about them. And the problem with invasive species often is that invasive species have a knack for being able to spread very quickly in a way that makes it very hard for us to find them. And by the time we usually end up finding invasive species populations, they're usually so widespread that we really have no hope of getting rid of them. And that's where you guys as volunteers come in. So talked about at the very beginning, invasive species, we cover 17 counties in the Finger Lakes. I am the only person looking for terrestrial, so that's land-based invasive species, in those 17 counties. Odds are you're going to find something before I do. And that's why we're really recruiting you guys as volunteers, because we just can't do it on our own. We really do need your help. We can kind of generalize how an invasive species spreads over time with what we call the invasion curve. This is a generalization, how an invasive species population spreads given enough time passing. So we kind of start at the bottom left here, the very beginning of time, and as we go up in the graph, the area that an invasive species infests increases, as well as the cost of controlling that invasive species. What we want to do is control invasive species when they're right here, when their populations are really, really small, which means the cost of controlling them are really, really small. The longer it takes us find an invasive species and adequately control it, the harder and harder it is for us to get rid of it, because the area they're infesting is going to get so large, it's just going to be too prohibitively expensive for us to actually deal with it. And it gets to the point where, our goals go from prevention to eradication, then just containing the invasive species, and then just sort of long-term management. So that's kind of the background. What are you guys going to be doing? How does the trail survey here work? So our goal is to identify, survey, and report invasive species in the Finger Lakes region. Anyone with a smartphone or a tablet can participate, and where it takes place is completely up to you guys. So you guys are our volunteers. We consider everything you do for us, even just being here tonight, as a favor to us, and we really appreciate that. And so as part of this program, we give you guys a lot of flexibility in terms of volunteering when and where and how you want. So in terms of where this takes place, it's really just up to you. A trail near you, your backyard, a local park, your neighborhood, it's completely your choice as to where to look for these invasive species. How this all actually works is that you guys are going to be asked to survey 3 times, once a month during June, July, and August. And we're going to teach you how to identify 2 different species for each of those months. So it's 2 species for June, 2 species for July, 2 species for August, for 6 in total. And all we ask you to do is just survey once. That's the bare minimum. If you want to survey for more than once a month, by all means, have at it. All we're asking you to do, though, the basic bare minimum is just once a month during those months for the species we are hoping for you to identify. It's that simple. The reason why we kind of focus on surveying trails is that trails are actually great places for invasive species to move in. Invasive species really love disturbed areas. And it turns out that trails are places that are very frequently disturbed. Human foot traffic's moving through, the clearing of the trail will change the environmental conditions. And so we often see very different environmental conditions along a trail side than we do in the interior of the forest or wherever you might be hiking. And these different environmental conditions are often really suitable for a lot of invasive species. So you actually don't really have to go off trail to look for invasive species. Just surveying along the trail itself is going to be the spot where you're most likely to find them. Oftentimes, a lot of our trails are really choked by invasive species. This is actually a trail right here in this picture, being really crowded out by Japanese knotweed. But you can see if you kind of look here in the middle, towards the bottom, this like little brown path, that's the actual trail. And so it's surveying trails, you're going right to the spots where invasive species really tend to pop up. So there are 3 steps we're going to go through tonight in terms of how you're going to participate. Learning how to identify invasive species, surveying invasive species, and then reporting those invasive species. Identifying the invasive species is super easy. We're going to teach you. We're going to get to that in just a second. So you don't have to have any invasive species or plant or animal identification knowledge beforehand. This is totally aimed towards beginners. If you are someone who doesn't know how to identify, an oak from a maple, that's totally fine. Beginners are always welcome here. Now, in terms of surveying, it's super simple. All you're going to do is find a trail near you. You're going to head down that trail and you're going to begin searching for the 2 species we're going to be asking you to look for that month. I want to really make this clear here. There is no need to go off the trail. We're not asking you to bushwhack and go through all the bushes. You're not Indiana Jones. You don't need to go crazy here. All we're asking you to do is just hike along the trail, and just from the trail itself, look out into the forest around you and just note if you find any of these invasive species. Now, if you find one of these invasive species, you're just going to note that with your phone. We're going to talk about how you do that with IMAP invasives. If you don't see either of the species you're looking for, we still want you to note whether or not you found that species. There's an option within IMAP invasives where you can note if you didn't find something. Now, that might seem a little counterintuitive. Like, why would you want to know if I didn't find something? Well, it's really important for us to know where invasive species are and where they aren't as well. And so, as part of the trail survey, if you're hiking down a trail and you don't see either of the species you're looking for, we still want you to take an observation, even if you don't see anything, because again, it helps us divert our resources to where the invasive species populations are. We have very limited, funding available to us, so we know where exactly the invasive species aren't. That means we could throw everything we have to where the invasive species are. So if you don't find anything, we're going to ask you to take an observation every quarter of a mile or about every 5 minutes of you walking down the trail, just to note that I did not find these invasive species. You might be thinking, does all this even work? Like, am I going to actually find anything as a volunteer if I go out on the trail? Actually, yes. Like I said before, I'm the only person who's being paid at least to look for invasive species in these 17 counties. So you guys, by and large, are probably going to find these species well before I do. And there are plenty of examples out there of notable invasive species being found by citizen scientists like yourselves, out there in the world well before experts themselves find it. So, for instance, the first spotted lanternfly population in upstate New York, this is an insect we're going to be looking for, found in Ithaca, was found by a regular volunteer. A 12-year-old actually discovered the first population of the invasive Asian clam in Minnesota. And so if a 12-year-old can do it, you guys definitely can. So this is really just to reiterate that, this volunteer program doesn't exist just to make you guys feel good. You guys really are contributing to active scientific and data collection and management by participating in this program. So the work you're doing is really valuable to us. I want you to make sure that you know that going into this. So with that being said, we're going to learn how to identify some of these invasive species. So let's just dive right into it. So basically the way this is going to work is, like we said before, there's 2 species you're going to be surveying for every month. These are going to be different species. And for each month, you're going to be looking for one established invasive species that we don't have a lot of data on and where their populations are, and one emerging invasive species. So that's going to be a species who's really relatively new to the region, whose populations are beginning to spread. The established species are ones that we know are very widespread, but we really don't have a lot of data on them. So with that being said, our first established invasive species for the month of June is the Norway maple. Some of you guys might have this tree planted in your front yard. I hate to inform you, but this is an invasive species. This is one of our most commonly planted trees here in New York. They do really well in all different kinds of environments, so they're really common in cities and suburbs and parks. Ever see a maple tree that has that like reddish color to it? That's a Norway maple. These guys are originally native to Europe, as the name would imply. And their impact is that they're a really aggressive invader, and they actually outcompete a lot of our native maple tree species. Now, identification is actually quite simple with these guys. For one, the bark up here in the top right is going to look very different than most native maple species. We have lots of different native maple trees here in New York, but their bark is all kind of like a gray color and it's smooth. Norway maple bark is actually made up of all these tight interlacing ridges and furrows. The bark will have a much more dark brown kind of color to it. Norway maple have that kind of typical maple leaf shape to it, so you can kind of identify it based on that. And really, the main way you can identify a Norway maple from any other maple species is to take this leaf, and you want to take the leaf so you're taking the entire stem with it off the tree. At the very base of that leaf stem, squeeze it a little bit, you'll see this white sap come out. This is a feature that is only found in Norway maples. It's not found in any of our native maple trees. And so when you're looking for Norway maples, if you see that white sap coming out, again, you have to take the leaf off and you have to take it off from where it connects to the twig, break it off, squeeze it, You see that white sap there, that's a sign it's Norway maple. All of the native maple species have a clear sap. So if it's milky white, it's Norway maple. Clear, it's a native maple species. There's other characteristics too here. So when we're looking at native maple trees, like I said before, they're going to have a gray bark. It's going to be more smooth, or it's going to have kind of like flakes to it. This is a sugar maple here. This is going to be the tree that most closely resembles a Norway maple. Here we have all the different leaves of our maple trees. So Norway maple is the only invasive one. All of these other maple species are all native. You could see the variety in maple leaves that we have. Things like red maple, mountain maple, striped maple, they'll only have 3 main points to them, while Norway maples will have many points to them. They'll have these lobes here, but not as deep as something like a striped maple. When you compare them to sugar maple, you can use that trick of the sap, or you can look at the bark to tell them apart. And if you're ever, kind of confused as to what a maple leaf looks like, always remember that Canada's flag is actually a maple leaf. And funnily enough, they accidentally based the maple leaf here off the Norway maple when they were really trying to base it off of the sugar maple. And there are a few differences if you look closely between these 2 leaves and the Canada leaf. I always think that's really funny. So that's our established species for June. Our emerging species for June is Mile-a-Minute. This is a really invasive vine species that is really starting to spread rapidly throughout our region. This plant is native to both South and Eastern Asia. It was accidentally introduced, so it wasn't on purpose. And with Mile-a-Minute, this is a really, really easy vine to identify. The leaves themselves are really distinctive. It's going to have these almost perfectly triangular shaped leaves on it, and there's actually further along the stem, there's going to be these perfectly circular leaves to them as well. You might see the berries. The berries will be like a bluer color, pretty bright, pretty obvious. You might not see them, depending on exactly when you're out looking for them. But really, if you see like a leaf of a plant that's essentially a perfect triangle and perfectly circular leaves to them, that's a Mile-a-Minute. This plant is an extremely fast grower, can easily overrun any other plant species that's growing in an area, and it's been reported to grow up to as much as 6 inches per day. So this is a very aggressive, these growing plants. And it's just really easy to identify. I always think this would be a great plant to teach like kindergartners to, because the shapes would be are so clear, it would be really distinct to them. So those are our June species. So for July, we're going to ask you to survey for a plant we call swallowwort. Swallowwort is our established invasive species. This plant can grow either as a vine or a weed. It will grab onto other plants if they're nearby, but it can freestand as a weed on its own. Swallowwort is widespread in our region, but we have a lot of data gaps as to where it is and where it isn't. It's originally native to Europe. And it's quite easy to identify. So for one, swallowworts, there's 2 species of them, black and pale swallowwort. They're both basically the same thing, so we just call them swallowwort, no real differences. The leaf arrangement on swallowwort is going to be important to understanding them. The swallowworts have what's called an opposite leaf arrangement. We can see in this little diagram here. Each leaf on swallowwort is going to have a little buddy, a little pair right next to it. This is not only found in swallowwort, it's actually found in a lot of different plants, but most plants have what's called an alternate leaf arrangement, where each leaf is by itself and they alternate up and down the stem. Swallowworts have that opposite arrangement. They're always going to be in pairs, those leaves. Leaves themselves are going to be long, tapering, and pointed. And the flowers and the seed pods are going to be really distinctive on these guys. So flowers are going to be really small. They're not going to be really flashy. They're going to be star-shaped. They're going to have 5 points to them. And they're going to be like a dark brown color, really unique flower. Once those flowers are pollinated, they'll actually become these like long seed pods, almost look like a pepper. These guys are really having an impact because they're very closely related to milkweed. And they're really having quite a big impact on our monarch butterfly populations, because monarch butterflies will often mistake swallowwort for milkweed, and swallowwort's actually toxic to monarch butterflies. So a big reason why monarchs are now on the endangered species list is because of the expansion of swallowwort. Just the flower there. Our emerging invasive species for July is going to be beech leaf disease. This is a really concerning one. This is an invasive disease that infects our native beech trees caused by a microscopic nematode. Its arrival is completely unknown. This was only found just a few years ago, and it's spreading really rapidly. What beech leaf disease does is it causes the shading in the color of the beech leaves, and it can kill a beech tree, especially a younger one, within just a few years. So these guys are really concerning to us. Now, something that's important to note, the shading that you're going to be looking for can be really light dependent. So this was a picture I took of a beech leaf. This is the same leaf in both pictures taken in the exact same location. I did not move my feet. But basically, if you have a beech leaf and it's pointed towards the ground, it can be really hard to see that shading in the leaves. If you go up and you point it towards the light, up towards the sun, shading then becomes really clear. So make sure when you're looking for beech leaf disease on beech trees, make sure you're always looking in a well-lit location, or just have that leaf and point it towards the sky. Beech leaf disease is really concerning to us because this disease is wiping out a lot of our beech trees. Beech trees are a really important tree species we have here in New York. They're one of our most common tree species. They're really important for wildlife because they produce a lot of nuts that wildlife rely on to survive through the winter. And beech trees are already dealing with beech bark disease. So having the second disease come is really, really threatening to our beech population. They're already being so hard hit. Now, signs to look for a beech tree. Beech trees are probably the easiest tree to identify in the forest. So beech trees will usually have this almost white, completely smooth bark, and they'll have, just kind of saying it here, they just have like the basic leaf shape. There's really nothing unique going on here. It's not like a maple leaf where it has all these points. It's just a normal looking leaf. And because this is one of our most common trees, you'll see these trees everywhere. Now, this picture here on the right, our beech trees are infested with a lot of other diseases right now, so you might not always see these perfectly healthy leaves or this perfectly smooth bark. Beeches are also dealing with disease that will really mess with the appearance of that bark. You'll usually see this on larger, older trees. There are also some other native diseases. This is called a beech leaf rolling aphid. This is not beech leaf disease. Neither of these signs are. This is a sign of a beech tree, so a beech can be infested with both these diseases and beech leaf disease. Just know that if you see like a curling of the leaf and like yellow coloration, it's a native disease. It's fine. It's not a big deal. We're really looking for that dark coloration between the leaf veins. That's beech leaf disease. Those are our July species. Now we're going to go on to our August species. First, for our emerging species in August is spotted lanternfly. You might have heard about this insect before. It's been getting a lot of news traction recently. Spotted lanternfly is a really big threat to our grapevine and apple tree industries because they love to feed on both trees. And when we think of the Finger Lakes, those are huge parts of our agriculture. So we're really concerned about spotted lanternfly. Spotted lanternfly is rapidly spreading throughout our region. And so when you're out looking for them in August, you're going to be looking at this picture down here in the bottom left. This insect that's going to be about 1 inch long. They're going to have pink wings and black spots to them. There's really no other insects in our region that look like this. So if you see this, please report it. Just know with spotted lanternfly too, these guys are often commonly found in cities and suburbs. So you can very easily find this in a local park or in your backyard. Probably you're more likely to find it in one of those spots as opposed to a drill. This is our August species to keep an eye on. Finally, our very last species, autumn olive. This is our established invasive species for August. This tree was introduced as an ornamental. Autumn olive is either a very large shrub or a very small tree, depending on what stage of its life it's in. So you're kind of looking for just like a really, really big shrub. Autumn olive is pretty easy to identify when compared to most shrubs because the leaves and the berries are both covered in these little speckles on them. So you can see in this picture here, you can see all these little dots on these leaves and even on the berries as well. That's a feature that's only found on autumn olive. It's not found on any other plant species. It's going to have these bright red berries with those little freckles on them in August. So it's going to be really easy to identify from far away. These guys are a really big concern because they crowd out a lot of other native plant species. You might confuse them with some other invasive species like honeysuckle, but really what you're looking for with autumn olive is you're looking for those speckles. There's no other plant, native or invasive, that has these little dots on it. So there's no, there's really no confusing it with anything else. So all that being said, those are our 6 species. If you have trouble identifying any of these species, this is not the app that we're going to be using to track the spread of invasive species, but this is something I recommend in case you want to go a little bit deeper into things. This is an app called Seek. And basically what Seek does is you point your phone's camera towards an invasive species, or any species that is, and it will do its best to identify it for you. So I actually pointed it towards my ferret, and it correctly identified it as a European polecat. So it has kind of hit and miss in terms of how often it works, but if you're someone who is struggling with learning some of these species, using Seek can be a good way to help you out with that. Just want to also give a shout out to the people who take the most points are going to be eligible for a mystery prize. This is something we just started last year, and I think the prizes are really cool. So just a little extra encouragement to get you to take some more points. But with that being said, are there any questions so far on any of the identification components on what an invasive species is, or what your role is here as a volunteer? Any questions? This app is a partnership between the New York Natural Heritage Program, which is basically based out of the DEC and my alma mater, SUNY ESF. And basically what IMAP Invasives is, it's a database of invasive species observations in New York State. And it really helps us get a sense of where invasive species are spreading. And it really helps us fill in data gaps. So right here, this map here is the locations, known locations of Tree of Heaven in New York State. We can see there's these really big gaps, right, in certain parts of the state. What we want to know is, are these areas places where Tree of Heaven hasn't colonized yet? Or are these places where Tree of Heaven is, but no one's gone around to survey for it? So that's really what we're looking for with IMAP Invasives here. IMAP Invasives is used by a ton of different organizations. It's used by us at the Finger Lakes PRISM. It's used by all the other PRISMs. It's used by New York State Parks, the New York State DEC, the Adirondack Mountain Club, the Nature Conservancy. Pretty much every major environmental organization in New York State uses this information to inform their invasive species management efforts. So when you're taking these observations with IMAP Invasives, you're not just uploading these points like directly to me. If you go to like a state park, for instance, then New York State Parks will be able to see the observation you made, and then they could say, oh, hey, Bob took a point here. Now that we know this invasive species is here, we can go in and eradicate it. So you really are contributing quite a bit to our knowledge of invasive species. And with IMAP Invasives, all the species that you guys upload are later confirmed by experts in the field. So they're going to be confirmed and basically double checked by me. So if you're ever having any issues with using, with identifying a species, maybe you're not sure, is that swallowwort? I don't know. You can always just upload a point, and then I'm going to double check it for you. So you don't have to worry about being 100% accurate every time. With that said, there's basically 3 phases to how we're going to set up IMAP Invasives tonight. We're going to set up the account and the app. We're then going to record an invasive species. We're going to take a practice point together, and then we're going to upload those records to the IMAP app. So we're going to go through 3 steps, and we're going to start with setting up the account and the app first. So 2 ways you can use IMAP Invasives. Through the mobile app and the online web application. We're going to start on the desktop here. So you could use this in your mobile phone's browser, on your tablet's browser, or on your computer if you're using just like a normal laptop or a desktop. So I sent the link in the chat. Click on that link. Use either Google Chrome, Firefox, or Safari. Other browsers give IMAP some issues, so don't use anything like Microsoft Edge or anything like that. Use these 3 browsers, and we're going to basically just set up our account together. So this is the account setup. We're going to follow along. So you're just going to do this with me. If you're having any issues, maybe you're falling a little bit behind, don't worry. I'll stay on, and we can go through these issues after the main presentation. So open up the New York IMAP Invasives website right now. You should be brought to this main page. At the very top left, you're going to hit the green button that says log in. Now, once you hit login, if you already made an account, you can log in. What we're going to be doing here is signing up for an account, assuming none of you have an IMAP Invasives account. Yeah, so what you're going to do, signing up for this account. It's free. It's just like signing up for any other account. You're just going to enter your first name, your last name, your email, your password, and your jurisdiction. You're just going to put New York as your state. So I'm just going to give you guys a second to go through that. Water while you guys do that.
So I have the app on my phone.
Yes.
And I have you on my computer. So you still want me to go to this website?
Yes, you still need to go to the website because there's something that we can only do on the desktop that you can't do on the mobile app.
So do I just shrink you? How do I still listen to you and go to a website?
Oh yeah, I mean, you could just minimize like the Zoom screen.
All right.
You can just like pop back on when you like see something.
All right, got it.
Okay, so we're gonna keep running here. Again, if anyone's like running a little bit behind, we can always go back later, but just for the sake of time and just to honor everyone's time and availability here, we're just gonna keep moving through. Okay, join. You're gonna be brought to this screen once you actually officially log in. It's gonna say IMAP Invasives has updated. Just hit OK, don't worry about it. This is the IMAP Invasives web browser tool. It's really interesting. It's really cool. Really, most of it is not important for us. There's a main menu. There's all this different stuff. I encourage you to play around with this if you're interested in invasive species. But what we're concerned about tonight. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Is my jurisdiction New York? Is that
yes,
what you
it's New
said?
York. Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks.
Yep. So what we're concerned about is the main menu here. So it's going to be that little leaf in the top left corner. You're just going to click on that. It's going to give you this drop-down menu. It's a jurisdiction species list, network species list, bunch of other stuff, blah, blah, blah. What I want you to do is click on projects once you get that drop-down menu. So once you click on projects, you're going to be brought to this page, the projects page. Your jurisdiction should be New York. And what you want to do is give me a little search bar over here. I want you to type in Finger Lakes PRISM Trail Survey. Finger Lakes PRISM Trail Survey. We have a few different surveys. We have like our HWA volunteer survey. That's not the one you want to do. Just Finger Lakes Trail Survey is what you're looking for. So once you type that in, the option is gonna pop up down here. You're just gonna click on the blue text and take you to this page, Finger Lakes PRISM Volunteer Trail Survey. This is the main project page. This is where we monitor basically all of our volunteers. Yeah, but we should have like over 100 volunteers at this point we've accumulated over the years. Basically all you're gonna do on this page, the whole reason we need to do the desktop version tonight, the very top right of the screen here is going to be this text that says request to join projects. All I need you to do is just hit request, and then it should just say request to send. So again, you're gonna go to project, the drop down menu, the top left, hit project. You're gonna type in Finger Lakes PRISM Volunteer Trail Survey. You're gonna pop up down here. You're gonna click on that. Once you're brought to this page, and again, you want to make sure this says up here, Finger Lakes PRISM Volunteer Trail Survey. If this Finger Lakes Institute or Finger Lakes HWA survey, you're in the wrong place. You want Finger Lakes PRISM Volunteer Trail Survey. You're just going to hit request to join project.
Okay, I can't find project.
Yeah, I can't either.
Okay, hang on. We have a few different questions there. One at a time.
I also can't find project.
Okay, you can't find project. So basically what you're going to do, you're going to go to this main map. Have you guys been to this page yet?
No, I joined.
Yes, I'm there.
I've filled in the information and then I hit join. And then you
That's
went on
me.
to say projects and we can't find it.
Okay, yeah,
Now
so
I have
once
to
you hit,
log in after I join, right?
yes, yeah, so after you join, try logging in at the top over here on the login screen, and it should bring you to this map.
Okay.
And once you're at this map, the leaf in the top left, it's your main menu. You hit that, it takes you to project, and then you go through the whole process after that.
Got it.
Well,
Okay.
how do I get to that? Because I'm looking at your screen.
Yeah, so you just need to go to like your browser and just go to the website that's in the chat. Like you need to like exit minimize the Zoom meeting and then head to this website.
Oh, minimize the Zoom. Okay.
Yes. I'm just going to keep going ahead just again because just to be respectful of people's time. If you have any other issues, I know you're catching up. We could deal with that later. But basically, that's everything we need to do in the online web application. We're now going to move over to the mobile app. So everything at this point is going to be on your phone. You're never going to really need to use the desktop version ever again. I have invasives, download it. We've had some issues there. We're going to go into setting up the app now. So in terms of setting up the IMAP invasive species app, basically what we're going to do is we're going to set our preferences. We're going to record an observation, and then we're going to upload those observations. So with the IMAP mobile setup, I want everyone on their phone to open up the IMAP invasives app right now. Once you open up the app, you will be brought to this kind of blank green screen. If you're not brought to that screen, you might take you to like a login screen first. You'll just enter in your email address and your password. But if it takes you to the screen, what you're going to do, you hit these three lines in the top left corner, and then you're going to hit preferences. And it should take you to this page on your phone. And so three lines up here on the green screen, you're going to hit preferences. You bring it to this page. What you want to do, jurisdiction species list New York. Your IMAP username, which is going to be the email address you use. IMAP password, the password you just created. And then you're going to hit retrieve IMAP lists. And it's going to load for a little bit. And it's going to say IMAP data retrieval successful. And you're going to hit OK. I'll give you guys a second for that. Okay. Things moving here. After you hit retrieve IMAP list, it's going to say it's successful, blah, blah, blah. You're going to scroll down on that same page. You want to make sure that for the species name, it says common. But what you want to do here, you don't have to do this, but it makes life a lot easier when you're volunteering in the field, is you want to customize your species list. So there's a lot of invasive species in New York. And basically, when you're observing species with IMAP invasives, and you go to select a species, it's going to give you a huge list, thousands of invasive species you're going to have to sort through. It takes forever. So what you can do is you can customize a species list, so only the species that we want you guys to survey for are going to pop up. And you can basically just go through and you could select the species that we're looking for. So this would be autumn olive, spotted lanternfly, beech fleet disease, swallowwort, mile-a-minute, and Norway maple. Again, you don't have to do this. It just makes life a lot easier. The defaults from pretty much everything else after that, the picture quality, the base map, don't worry about any of that stuff. It doesn't matter. Just skip it. And you go to the very bottom of the page, and it's going to say default project and default organization. So what you want to do here, and this might not pop up on the first time. So if it doesn't work, don't worry. Just try it again tomorrow. Because I need to add you to our project, which I'll be doing after the presentation. You want to select your default project to Finger Lakes PRISM Volunteer Trail Survey. This is basically just make sure that everyone's points go to the same location, and that I'm able to see everyone's points. If you don't do that, I won't be able to see your points. So please make sure you set your default project there. Organization, you can forget organization. You guys aren't a part of an organization. I'm a part of an organization, but you're not. Skip organization, doesn't matter. Once you get through all of that, you're just going to hit the little button at the bottom and you're going to hit save. So that's everything we need to do to set up the accounts and the app. Any very brief questions we have so far?
So I'm also Hemlock Woolly Adelgid
Mhm.
volunteer.
Yeah.
And that is, well, HWA volunteer survey.
Yeah, so we don't want you taking points as part of the HWA survey. We want it as part of the PRISM trail survey.
Finger Lakes PRISM volunteer trail survey. Okay.
That is correct. Yes.
So
Thank you
in
for
fall,
coming.
if I start back with the other one, I can change the default to that.
Yes, yes. And thank you for coming to our other volunteer projects.
Yeah.
Appreciate
All
it.
right, cool.
Okay, so we set up our account, we set up our app, and now we're gonna actually go into recording an invasive species. By the way, there's like a sandwich in the back here. The person who like made this presentation, I visualized it as like steps as like a sandwich. Just how it works. I don't know. Okay, so once you hit save, it's going to take you back to the original green screen. We're going to go to the top right, and we hit add observation. Follow along here. This is basically how you're going to be recording invasive species data in the field. Oh, what you're going to do first is you don't have to do this tonight, because again, this is just a practice round. But when you're in the field, we want you to take a photo of the invasive species that you see. So you would take a photo. If you made a custom species list of the species we're looking for, you can enable that if you would like. You don't have to. Again, that was all optional, but it just makes your life easier. What you're going to do is you're going to select the species. If you already made your custom species list, then you might not have this option, but if you didn't, fake species should pop up. If you did make the custom species list, you select any species. But again, this is just a practice, so none of this really matters. Select anything that pops up, not a big deal. Once you select your species, you're going to note whether it was detected or not detected. This is when you're in the field. This is when you're going to note if you find something or not. And remember, if you don't find anything that we're asking you to look for, we still want you to note that you didn't find that species. So if you're looking in the woods and you don't see any swallowwort or you don't see any mile a minute, every quarter of a mile, we still want you to take an observation and put species not detected. You don't really need to take a picture using your camera. If you don't find it, you can maybe just take a picture like of your surroundings. But either way, again, still want you to take a picture if you don't find anything. So once you select whether it's detected or not detected, again, this is practice. Pick whatever you like for now. You're going to keep scrolling down. Don't worry about the little map. Don't worry about your location, your latitude, your longitude. Your phone's going to do all of that work for you. Skip it. Not a big deal. Once you get down here, though, you're going to see IMAP 3 project. It's going to say optional. This is not optional. This is not optional for being one of our volunteers. You're going to change that to Finger Lakes PRISM Volunteer Trail Survey. And this might not work today because I haven't had a chance to add you guys yet, but please, 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 please make sure you do this in the future. Organization, you could skip that. Time search, I don't care how long it took you to find these species, 5 minutes, 5 hours, not a big deal to me. It's just skip that. What we want to know, though, is the size of the area containing the invasive and the distribution of that invasive species. So there's going to be a few different options there. So for one, like size of the area might have, for instance, up to 10 square feet to more than an acre. Again, you're just going to be kind of eyeballing it here, just how big these areas are. And distribution of the area is going to be traced. So it's like finding like one plant on its own, sparse, a few plants here and there, dense, lots and lots of plants. A monoculture is like literally everything you see is just that one plant. And then linearly scattered just means like you see a lot of it, but it's just along the trail side. And it's not going into the actual woods itself. Any comments you think we might want to know, feel free to put in comments, but you don't have to. And then at the very bottom, you're just going to save. Okay. Once you hit save, now you have your official observation. Now we're going to go through how to upload those records to IMAP. So once you went through and you made that point, you should see a yellow card on your screen now. Now, if you want to go back and ever edit any points that you find, you can always hit this little pencil here and change anything. With that being said, to upload an actual point to IMAP Invasives, what you're going to do is you're going to hit that little gray box there. You're going to go to the top left here, these 3 lines. You're going to hit upload selected. It's going to ask you, are you sure? You're going to hit OK. It's going to load for a little bit. And then that little yellow card is going to disappear. Now, what's important to note here is that we're asking you guys to go out and hike on trails and look for invasive species. The nice thing about IMAP Invasives is that you can actually use it without cell reception. So you could be in the middle of nowhere, and if you don't have any cell service, you could still use IMAP Invasives. What that means, though, is that you have to manually upload these records by yourself. So when you go home, always make sure that you're uploading these records. If you see the yellow card on your phone, that means that the record is still on your phone. It's not in the actual online database. Only when it disappears and you get this green screen here is the record actually away into the ether. We've gone through all the steps on how to use IMAP Invasives. Please know that taking good photos is essential. We can only confirm your points if you take a really good picture. So please make sure when you're taking a picture, don't take something that's blurry, don't take something that's far away. What we want to see are the actual signs of that invasive species. So it needs to be focused and it needs to be close up. So if you see something like autumn olive, for instance, don't take a picture of the big shrub from far away. Just go up to the leaves and just take a picture of those little speckles on the leaves. That's all we really need to see, because once we see those speckles, we know that you found autumn olive. If you see swallowwort, take a picture of that little flower if you see any of it. Again, make sure that it's focused and it's close up, like in this picture on the right here, so we actually see the signs of that invasive species.
So I had a choice as I was doing this for photo 25%, 50%, or 100%.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
So that's the main IMAP Invasives training. Thank you guys for sticking through with this. If you're interested, you can join us for New York State's Invasive Species Awareness Week. This is coming up in a few weeks from June 5th to June 12th. We're going to be having lots of different invasive species events across the region. So if you're interested, and if this wasn't enough invasive species for you, check out our website, fingerlakesinvasives.org. We'll have a whole schedule up next week on how to take part in it. So that's just a little plug there. With that being said, you're all ready to go. You can start surveying as soon as you'd like, even tomorrow if you want to. If you need help finding a location, please let me know. We actually did get some feedback from some of our partners on areas that do need some surveying. So if you're looking for a good spot to start with places like Harriet Hollister Recreation Area, Stony Brook State Park, or really any of our local land trust preserves. So, and these are located all over our region. So if you're someone in like the southwestern southern tier, Livingston, Steuben counties, I would check out the Genesee Valley Conservancy. If you're someone in central Finger Lakes, Seneca, Cayuga counties, Tompkins County, those kinds of spots, check out the Finger Lakes Land Trust. If you're someone out by Onondaga County, Portland County, Madison County, I would check out the Central New York Land Trust. And if you're someone like Rochester area, Monroe County, Wayne County, check out the Genesee Land Trust. These organizations do really great work, and they have tons of trails, and they know that you guys are going to be surveying some of these trails, and they're really excited about it.